Well, good morning, church, and welcome to Alive Fellowship Church. So we're beginning a marriage series this week, and I think it's important for all of us to understand that this is not how to have a perfect marriage, but because we all know that that is just impossible. It is just not going to happen, and that's because you have two people who, in a lot of ways, are very selfish, individuals, and the truth is that none of us are perfect. The Bible even says no one is righteous, right? No, not one. And so I think it's important as we begin this series, let's take the word perfect husband, or I need a perfect wife, or I want to be a perfect wife, a perfect marriage. Let's take that out of our vocabulary and out of our thought process. Instead of that, let's begin to think on how we can have a God-honoring marriage. Because if we have a God-honoring marriage, we will have joy in the home. We will have joy in the relationship. There will be a happiness, fulfillment in our marriage. And also, let me just say this. As we go through this, however many weeks we're going to do, I think it's important that you work on you and I work on me. Let's not point the finger at each other in our marriage and realize that all of us have some warts and we have some blemishes that need to be corrected. But the truth is, there is a lot of unhappiness in marriages. There is a lot of unhappiness. Now, I came up with some stories that I think really kind of show, and they're kind of funny, that really kind of what's going on in this area of unhappiness. So a man was looking at a couple and he said to his wife, "Look at them. They look so happy. They look like a happy couple." And she said, "Don't be too sure. They're probably saying the same thing about us," right? And then here's another one. There was a guy who was crying over a tombstone at a cemetery, and he was just really crying and wailing, "Why did you have to die? Why did you have to die?" So another man is watching this, and he sees this because he's visiting another lost relative's grave, and he said, "Sir, I'm so sorry for your loss. Is that your wife?" And the man said, "No, it's my wife's first husband." I mean, really? And then the last one is this. Some people think marriage is just three rings. The engagement ring, we get that, the wedding ring, and suffering. And I know those are funny stories, but they really kind of tell an amazing story that there is a lot of unhappiness in marriages today. And so let's just admit that we all have some work to do in our relationships, in our individual people, if we are going to have a God-honoring marriage. So let's start with that. So welcome to our marriage series, and I believe all of this is going to help all of us to be better in our marriage, and not just in our marriage, but in all of our relationships, how we relate to each other. Now, I want you to remember something as we get started. Remember that you cannot change them, but you can change you. And so I'm going to ask you, please don't miss a week. Whether you're watching online right now or whether you're physically coming to our facilities, please don't miss a week, and encourage and invite somebody to watch it with you. Now, we all know that nobody goes into a marriage planning on it failing, but in many cases, unfortunately, it does. It really happens all the time. Some of you sitting there right now watching this have gone through and have faced the tragedy of divorce. Some have seen their parents kind of go through it, and then you recognize how it has affected you. Some of you are in a difficult marriage right now, and it's strained right now. And you are honestly in a place that if something doesn't change, you might find yourself as one of those statistics that we talk about. And then some might be in simply a platonic relationship with your spouse. I mean, basically, you're simply roommates. There's no intimacy. There's no sex. There's no love. There's no passion. Basically, you guys are buddies. I mean, you're just friends that are living together. Now remember, this is key. No relationship is beyond repair. No relationship is beyond repair if you are willing to make the investment. Now, before I kind of share with you what I want to do today, because we're just really going to have some fun today, here is what this series is not. To use a football term, this series is not a Hail Mary pass. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today, and even in the upcoming weeks, we're going to use some football terminology in our marriages. And so there is this term in football that is called the Hail Mary. What that means is I'm not going to give you one Hail Mary pass so you can win, and it's going to take just one thing to fix and to improve our marriage. So in football, when a team is losing and there's no more time left onto the clock, the offensive team might do something that is called a Hail Mary, which means all the receivers go down into the end zone and they just throw one long pass, praying and hoping that somebody catches it and they win the game. And I think a Hail Mary is a fitting name for this play because it really is used as a last resort. Here's what you're wanting. You're wanting a miracle. A Hail Mary pass is like a prayer in which the offensive team hopes for a miracle. And this series is not that. This is not going to give you just one Hail Mary miracle pass to get you to a place of a God-honoring marriage. This is not what this is. So if we're going to have a great marriage, it is going to be built, in football terminology, by 3-yard runs, 4-yard runs, a 5-yard pass, grinding it out play by play, issue by issue, hurt by hurt, tier by tier. It is consistency. You see, getting married is about being in love. Staying married is about developing the skills and maturing to keep that love. Now, next Sunday is the biggest area that people don't get in marriage relationships, and that is to how to develop a game plan. And so we're going to be talking about that next week, how to develop a winning game plan in your marriage. Why? Because good relationships are no accident. And Proverbs says it this way: a house is built by wisdom and becomes strong through good sense. And so that's what we're going to do next week. So for today, here's what I want to do today, is I've entitled this kind of Making the Call. Now, in all sports, there is a person or persons who are called referees and umpires and officials. You also have coaches and assistant coaches. And so these are the people who have this job of making sure that people are playing by the rules. And if somebody does something wrong, it needs to be corrected. Maybe a foul or a flag is thrown. And so what I want to do in this series today is we're going to look at some actual football terminology, some words, some violations, and see how it might relate to our marriage. So we're going to have some fun today as we kick this series off, as we talk through some of this. And then next week, we're going to get into the game plan and then get into some things we should do, how we defend our marriage, the tools to help our marriages. So we got a lot to go through. So I promise you, you'll never watch a football game the same. So in football, there is this thing that is called a false start. That's when, before the play starts, somebody goes quickly, or somebody goes first, or somebody gets out before it's time to go. So this is when you go before it's time. So I started thinking, how does that relate to our marriage? See, here's the problem. Too many marriages get off on the wrong foot. Singles or someone who was married, be very, very careful. Listen, marriage is one of the most important decisions of a lifetime. And whether it's by parent influence or confirmation through people you might trust or premarital counseling or coaching, use that to make sure that you are prepared for marriage. So nobody goes into a game and says, I hope we lose. No, they don't want to do that. And it is so important to not false start. And what I'm saying is, it's so important not to get ahead of God. We must do the hard work at whatever age we are before we get married and realize what we're doing, and with the best of our ability, think through the whole process. We have to plan. So we can't get ahead of God in this. Luke chapter 14 says this in verse 28. But don't begin until you count the cost. For who would begin construction of a building without first calculating the cost to see if there is enough money to finish it? In verse 29. Otherwise, you might complete only the foundation before running out of money, and then everyone would laugh at you. They would say there's a person who started the building and couldn't afford to do it. So here's my point in this area. Don't jump too fast. Don't start too fast. Take your time, think through, and most importantly, don't get ahead of God. And so that really is for those people who are not married yet, and they're thinking about it, or maybe they're dating somebody. Don't get ahead of God. Don't try to make something just because you want it so badly. Now, there is another penalty or play in football, and it's really called an illegal substitution, or we could say too many men, or in some cases, too many women on the field. And so let me explain to you how this kind of works in marriage. Marriage is designed to be one man and one woman. See, here's what we know. One is to have your attention. One person is to capture your heart. One is to be the apple of your eye. Listen very carefully. Satisfying your sexual desires through fantasies, pornography, or other partners is an illegal substitution. So in today's world, I would also add this. Being married and somehow justifying texting to a person of the opposite sex regularly and often is a problem, and it can lead to bigger problems. Now, if you're taking care of a situation, it's work-related, something like that, I certainly get that, right? We certainly understand that, but here's how I would say it. Prolonged, often texting to a person of the opposite sex, in my opinion, is a illegal substitution. And I think the Bible talks about this. Pastor Wendell, quit being a prude. Listen. If it makes your spouse uncomfortable and they ask you not to be texting like that, that's what makes it wrong. That's what makes it wrong, because she is supposed to be the apple of your eye. And Matthew chapter 5 verse 28 says, "But I say anyone who even looks at a woman with lust has already committed adultery with her in his heart." And in Job 31, "I made a covenant with my eyes not to look with lust at a young woman." And so it encompasses all of those things. It can be emotional, it can be physical. You have to guard and protect your marriage and make sure there are no illegal substitutions. Satisfying your sexual desire through fantasies, pornography, flirtatious talking, or other partners is unhealthy and is only going to set you back. It is a sin, and it's not a part of a God-honoring marriage. You want a God-honoring marriage, then we stop it now. If there's illegal substitutions going on, we stop it now. And so here's another one. Here's another terminology in football. It's called holding. So in football, you're not allowed to hold people. And so I started thinking about this in relationship to marriage. It's like a 10-yard penalty. So guys, this one is for you, and this is a big one. I said holding, not sex. Guys, when she says hold me, that doesn't mean I want passionate sex. Men many times will use love to get the sex they want. Women many times will use sex to get the love that they want. You see, there is a sense of security that a woman receives when being held by her man. If you expect to score a touchdown, you need to hold her more with zero intimate touches. Now watch, guys. Let me help you out in this particular area. Women will pull away from holding from us because they've learned our playbook, right? They've learned our playbook. You hold her for 90 seconds, and then all of a sudden you begin to make your move, right? Men, I want you to try something. I want you to try this. Honey, I just want to be clear up front tonight. I don't want to have sex with you tonight. I just want to hold you. I want to snuggle. I want to kiss you before we go to sleep, okay? No hanky-panky. Guys, I want you to try that, right? Now, your wife is probably going to be jumping out of the bed because she thinks somebody has taken your place and has replaced you with a robot. Holding does not mean sex. And here's another call that comes out of football. Interference. That's where something interferes with what's going on. And you can't do that. You can't interfere with somebody. Too much interference, meaning basically something is getting in the way. Now watch. This is when you allow circumstances around you and your spouse to control the relationship. Something is interfering with the relationship. Somebody else. It could be an attitude. It could be an addiction. But when you allow your emotions to control the reality of the situation. So let me give you an example of this. When I'm happy, the relationship is great. It's wonderful. It's awesome. When I'm sad, it's not very good. When I'm happy, I will treat you nice. When I'm sad or upset, I will treat you very unloving. That is interference. That is not good. 2 Corinthians says we live by believing, not by seeing. And so we have to watch out for interference. Here's another one. It's called unnecessary roughness. Now in football, unnecessary roughness is when you go over the lines of basically the football rules of tackling somebody or maybe hitting somebody. This is a personal foul. And so let me relate it to marriage this way. It is really the illegal use of hands. It's unnecessary roughness. No hitting or acting like you're going to hit. No throwing objects at each other. The frying pans have to stay in the kitchen. This would also include no bullying. No physical, sexual, emotional, or verbal abuse. Now, let me just deal with this for a second. Let me deal with emotional abuse, which is becoming more and more prevalent in our society and in our world. Emotional abuse involves attempts to frighten the other person, control the other person, or isolate the other person. This type of abuse doesn't involve physical violence, though it might involve threats of violence. It's characterized by a person's words, their threats. It can be humiliation. It can be negating. It can be criticizing. It can be controlling, shaming, accusing, blaming, denial. Those are all wrong, and that is not God honoring. Why? Because God, none of those are love. Jesus commanded us to love like He loved. And so if you hit your wife or you hit your husband, you need help and you need counseling. And we also have to be careful with emotional abuse. And let me just say this. Your kids will reproduce who you are. Unnecessary roughness has no place in a God-honoring marriage. Another football term is one that's called tripping. That's where you might stick your foot out and trip somebody, and that is not allowed. And when I think about that in relationship to marriage, it's where you allow the issues and problems to trip up your spouse. And many times it's us. How many times do we see one individual trip up another in their hurts or habits and their hang-ups? Now, this is when we do something that causes them to fall. So we're the ones that are causing them to fall. So 1 Corinthians chapter 8 says it this way, "But you must be careful so that your freedom does not cause others with a weaker conscience to stumble. For if others see you with your superior knowledge eating the temple of an idol, won't they be encouraged to violate their conscience by eating food that has been offered to an idol? So because of your superior knowledge, a weak believer for whom Christ died will be destroyed. And when you sin against other believers by encouraging them to do something they believe is wrong, you're sinning against Christ." And then verse 13 says, "So if what I eat causes another brother to sin, I will never eat meat again as long as I live." Here's the idea of this. The best thing we can do is to help our spouses. Not trip them up, not cause them to fall, but become a better version of God in you. Improve you. The truth is that all of us are very kind of contagious people. And so we don't want to be the ones guilty of tripping them up. Here's another terminology. In football, there's a thing that's called an incomplete pass. This is where I throw the ball. I'm wanting you to catch it, but you drop it, right? And it's an incomplete pass, and it doesn't count. We didn't gain anything. A lot of times in marriages, we will have incomplete communication. And so this is where we really are not communicating. We don't give it enough time, or we don't give it enough attention. This is true in so many households, especially in today's world. We must, if we're going to have a God-honoring marriage, we must be able to effectively communicate our feelings, our emotions, our hurts, victories, fears, disappointments, joys, the highs and the lows, without any condemnation. And so let me give you a little homework to do this week. Take 15 minutes of FaceTime for healthy communication. Face-to-face communication about your day. No TV, no music, put the kids to bed, whatever you need to do. Some would say, well, he or she should know how I feel. It's like we want our spouses to be prophets or telepathic, right? Now, this is one of the greatest areas of success or failure in a marriage. People will say, well, he just won't talk to me. Proverbs 16:24 says, kind words are like honey, sweet to the soul and healthy for the body. And so we should have kind words. We should be willing to sit down and communicate that. And then here is another terminology. In football, there's this thing called a timeout, right? That's where maybe things aren't going as great as we would like them to. And so we call a timeout. And basically, we want to pause everything. We want to breathe. We kind of want to get our thoughts together. We want to get our ideas together. We want to kind of just figure this out. So many times in our marriages, we are hurting our relationships because we fail to take a time out. And a timeout in a marriage is the purpose to breathe and recognize that we need to do something to improve the marriage, meaning we need to have some quality time. We need to take a time out from the world or from life and work on the marriage. So when was the last time we as marriages had quality time together? We talk about priorities all the time, and we need to live them. You know, we talk about the Sabbath day of rest. We do vacations, a getaway. Maybe it's a date night. It's being okay with saying no to something that is good for something that is better, and that's the health of the marriage. So don't be afraid to just put some things on pause so that you can have some individual time together. Here's another one. It's called intentional grounding in football. That's when you throw something into the ground because you just want to get away from the play. Now, this in marriage is when you intentionally do something to hurt the other person, not like tripping them up, right? That could have been a way of tripping. This is when we purposely are trying to hurt the other person. Husbands, wives, it's when we put each other down. We call names. Maybe it's a derogatory nickname. We embarrass them publicly in front of our friends. We dismiss them. We say jokes, insulting their appearance or belittling accomplishments. We somehow are just pushing buttons. And that could be just to name a few. It's disrespectful. It's degrading. We're only in it for putting the other person down. Ladies, gentlemen, listen very carefully. We would never allow someone to do that to our spouse. You know that we wouldn't. But somehow we think it's okay for us to do it. And Proverbs says our words have the power of death and life. So we should be speaking life and blessing into them. Proverbs 12:18, some people make cutting remarks, but the words of the wise bring healing. And so when we use the right words, we bring healing to the marriage. In marriage, listen, we are tied together. If I sink her down and belittle her, Karen, if I do that to Karen, it's only going to impact me. We are one. When you hurt your spouse, you are wounding yourself. Also in football, there's this thing called a safety, right? And when I think about safety in a marriage, this is what every relationship needs. Now listen very carefully. If you don't allow your spouse to feel safe in the marriage, that's a problem. The greatest need of a woman in a marriage is that she wants to feel safe and secure. Your home and your marriage must be one of those safe places where you know that you will be loved and accepted. So how do you create a safe environment? It's unconditional love. It's learning their love language, and we'll talk about these in the upcoming weeks. Acceptance and affirmation, and remember that no mistake is permanent. And here's the last one I want to talk about. In football, the whole goal in football is to score a touchdown. It's points that get put up on the board. It's how you win. It's why you play the game. Men, women, if you expect to score, now hear me in this, touchdowns are a result of practice. Touchdowns are a result of warming up properly, many consecutive plays, passes, runs, pats on the back, encouraging words. In football, it's the right tackles, it's the high fives, it's the sacks, it's all of those things that happen throughout the game. Too many couples, as I started with, want to simply throw one pass and expect the marriage to be perfect. It rarely happens in football. Speak her love language. Speak his love language. Start early in the day. As I said, it takes 3-yard increments. It's not just one Hail Mary pass. Now, let's shift gears for the remaining moments that we have. And we're going to go into more detail in the upcoming weeks, but I want to just give you some rules. I want to give you some rules of engagement in conflict, right? So every game, every football game has rules that you have to follow. That way, nobody has an unfair advantage. And so when I think about rules of conflict, we know we're going to have conflict in our marriages. So what would be some rules that we would adhere to so that no one has an unfair advantage and we're working on the marriage? Remember Proverbs 15:18 says, a hot-tempered person starts fights. A cool-tempered person stops them. So when you find yourself in a conflict in your marriage, what are some rules that we need to pay attention to and to play by? So let me go through these real quick for you. First one I would say is you got to listen first and talk second. That's a biblical principle, right? Slow to speak, quick to listen. We get so caught up in voicing our opinion and we don't hear what the other person is saying. So how do you know if you're listening well? Well, here's the best way. Can you accurately repeat the other person's point of view? So we have to learn to listen first. Also, never attempt to communicate when you're halt. Pastor Wendell, what did you say? Never attempt to have serious communication when you are halt. H-L-A-T. H-A-L-T. Hungry, angry, lonely, or tired. Those are just recipes for the communication not to be good. So play by that rule. It's okay to call a timeout, as I talked about, if tempers get hot. Don't avoid the issue. Just let it rest for a moment. Share feelings, not accusations. So if you're in a conflict, share your feelings, not accusations against them. See, people can refute your facts, but they cannot refute your feelings. So let me give you an example. An accusation would be something like this. You're always late coming home from work. Or stop yelling at me. Instead of saying it like that, share your feelings. Honey, I feel unimportant when you come home from work late and you don't let me know. Or when you yell at me, it frightens me and it hurts my feelings. So share your feelings, not accusations, right? Here's something else that we need to do when we are having conflict. Avoid using all-inclusive words like never and always. It makes people just more defensive. You never help me with the kids. Well, that's not true, right? You're always on your phone. Well, that's not true. You never make me a priority. Well, that's not true. And so be very, very careful and avoid using those types of words. Stay focused on the topic at hand. And once again, we're going to go through these in much more detail down the road. So stay focused on the topic at hand. Don't pile on old issues. We're very guilty of using this tactic. We always pull out our sack, our collection of past issues. You want to know what that shows is that when we have not dealt with something in the proper way, that's what it shows. That if I'm always bringing up past mistakes or things that you did, it tells me that I never dealt with it back there. We may have said, I'm sorry and I forgive you, but the reality, we are really wanting a pound of flesh. Now, let me give you a couple more real quick. Find some common ground. Find some common ground. It's not my way or your way, but our way. Value your relationship higher than being right or wrong. As we talked about communication, keep it respectful on the conversational level. Be willing to be wrong, compromise, apologize. Just as Christ forgave you, you forgive others. I would also say it's very important, never go to bed with unresolved conflicts. I mean, it's like a baby's dirty diaper. If you leave it, it's only going to begin to smell worse. Ephesians 4, and don't sin by letting anger control you. Don't let the sun go down while you are still angry, for anger gives a foothold to the devil. It's just given Satan a foot in your marriage. Here's the last one. After a disagreement, do an act of kindness to let your spouse know you are ready to move forward in the relationship. So there may be some marriages that are watching right now that it might be headed for a very difficult place. Listen, it's not over. It's not over. Are you willing to do the hard work? Are you willing to come back? And are you willing to build your house on the rock, a firm foundation? If you try to build it on sex or money, it's going to crash. We will only make it if we build our marriages on the rock of Jesus Christ. Pastor Wendell, we've been married for years and we did not build it in the right way. What do we do? I think that's a great question. All of these principles apply because the truth is, here's what you can do if you've been married for a while. Maybe it's time to remodel. You're not building the house on a rock, but you're remodeling the house that you've built. And so that may be some changes that need to take place. That's why next week is so important. And I want you all to tune in or come to our campus. And that is how to develop a winning game plan. Why? Because good relationships are no accident. A house built by wisdom and becomes strong through good sense. And if you know a family member or a friend and you know they're kind of going through some struggles, tell them to tune in, tell them to come and take a look, and let's see what God can do. Are you willing to give God a chance to remodel your marriage or to begin and build your marriage on the right foundation? We want to say thank you very much for joining us. All of you out there that are watching right now, thank you for being so giving. And if you're watching and you want to partner up with us and help us in that area, you can go to our website and it gives you all the prompts to be able to give to our ministry so that we can continue to do this and further God's kingdom at our campus at Alive Fellowship Church. We love you. We thank you. And we'll talk to you next week with the Marriage Series number 2.